Now, is it liberal? Maybe, but a conservative until I got involved, because I don't care who wins up there. I frankly probably would do better with the liberal than the conservative, if you want to know the truth. But
I think this is the time for the Conservative Party to go tough on immigration. That's something that Mark Carney and the Liberals will never be able to steal. I think going hard on crime is a similar issue too. I guess what I'm here to say is it's not over. Don't lose your mind. Don't read too much into the polls. In fact, sometimes those polls are designed to demoralize us. Don't worry that conservatives are being tricked. They're not. In fact, I think this is the opportunity for the conservatives to become more conservative and go places Mark Carney can't go. The reason I came home so quickly is obvious. Canada has a big battle here. And while it's important that I still cover Tommy Robinson because that will have an effect not just in the UK but around the world, we have a battle here, and it is a special duty that Rebel News fights like hell. And it was looking pretty good for a couple of years there, wasn't it? I mean, really, around the start of the convoy in February 2022, that's when Justin Trudeau started declining in the polls. And by the time 2023 came around, he was pretty far back. And 2024 was pretty cool. We were all daydreaming about supermajorities and what we want Pierre Poilievre to do next. And then a series of unusual events happened, and Justin Trudeau was replaced by Mark Carney. I call him Trudeau 2.0, but he's smarter and harder working. And more than that, he doesn't have the scandals and the plagues that Trudeau had associated with him. So of course you take him out of the picture. Of course the Liberal vote is going to go up. Mark Carney is now ahead in certain polls. And in some betting markets, if you know what I mean, there are some of these online political betting markets where you can, really like betting on a basketball game or something, you can bet on an election and you put real money in. And the thing about betting on an election is you don't have to root for the team that you like. You can say, I don't like the Liberals, but I really think they're going to win, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. That's the difference. Anyone can tell a pollster how they feel or tell their friends and family how they feel. But if you had $100 riding on it, who do you really think is going to win? And so in some ways, these betting markets can be more accurate than other opinion polls, especially when you have an enormous number of participants. And some of these political betting markets have a huge base, so they shouldn't be taken lightly. In other words, it is time to worry, but it's not time to panic. And it's important not to be demoralized. First of all, you're not going crazy. Don't worry. People are not suddenly being fooled into thinking that Mark Carney is some great savior. They're not. If you look at polls, including from one of my favorite pollsters, David Coletto in Abacus, a lot of Mark Carney's support for the Liberal Party these days, is the collapse of the NDP. Now, I know a vote is a vote, and so it doesn't necessarily make you feel better to know that the NDP is collapsing into the Liberals. But it's important when I say don't be demoralized, because it's not like conservatives who have been skeptical about Justin Trudeau for years are suddenly being tricked or hornswoggled into voting for Mark Carney. No, it's just NDPers who were really never serious about it. Jagmeet Singh is not a serious person. The NDP is not a serious party. They just sort of parked their vote with the NDP as a political statement, like wearing a Che Guevara shirt. But now that they see, and they would have voted for the NDP if it was going to be a Pierre Poilievre conservative blowout. I mean, why not then? But if it's actually a close vote, a lot of those NDP voters are smart enough to strategically say, wow, our vote actually matters now, and we should probably give it to the guy with the greatest likelihood of beating the Tory. So don't think that suddenly people have gone mad and think that Mark Carney is a genius. It's that they're saying, oh, this guy actually has a chance. The media are certainly fresh and friendly. The polls suggest he could pull off an upset, so let's vote strategically. I think that's a lot of what's happening. Like I said before, obviously just getting rid of Trudeau is going to move those numbers up because so many of his scandals are personally associated with him. Now, of course, the media are awful. They would look for an excuse to support anyone other than Pierre Poilievre for ideological reasons and as for personal and selfish reasons too, because of course Poilievre has said he will end funding the CBC, and he has intimated that he would do similar for other media subsidies. So just out of pure survival instincts, the media are going to support whoever is against Poilievre. But there are some journalists who are waking up. Here's a clip of Bob Fife. This is about a week old now, starting to ask some questions about Mark Carney and his failure to, answer basic public policy questions, basic accountability questions. Here's Bob Fife.
Well, what he doesn't tell us is how much he's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the question here. Are you worth $10 million, $20 million, $50 million? We have no idea. Who is the person who's running the blind trust? Is it your brother? Is it, if you're having an independent person who's supposed to take care of the blind trust, that person should be independent and far removed from Mr. Carney's assets. We don't know who that is. Is he requiring to sell all the stocks, which apparently you're supposed to, but has he sold all the stocks and his investments in anything that may put him in a conflict with the government? Those are things that he needs to answer to Canadians, and he doesn't want to answer those questions. And you said he was a little testy. He does not like tough questions from journalists. He's used to a more compliant financial press when he was a central banker, and they're very much respectful of them. Well, we're political reporters. We have an obligation to ask the tough questions, and that's something we're going to have to watch for during the campaign. Is when he gets angry or annoyed or arrogant at journalists for pressing him on issues that he doesn't want to answer.
Bob Fife works for the Globe and Mail. Of course, in so many ways, they're an official establishment regime media, but got to give Bob Fife credit. Him and the small team that he works with, they have not been afraid to take on the Liberals. They broke, for example, the Jody Wilson-Raybould scandal. They break much of the China scandals in this country. So even though the Globe and Mail is typically a liberal-leaning newspaper, you have to give credit to their journalists. Sometimes they actually fight the Liberals. Mark Carney, whenever he's pressed, it shows that he's brittle. And it shows that he's not exactly used to being candid about things that he regards as private. He's never been asked tough questions before, certainly not tough personal questions. And I predict that he will campaign a little bit like how Joe Biden campaigned in the 2020 election, which is basically hiding in the basement. What I mean by that is doing an announcement in a super friendly media setting and just generally not going out into a circumstance where he's vulnerable. There's been some interesting photo ops lately. Both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney have gone to heavy industrial sites like a steelworkers site. When Poilievre goes, all the people dressed up as steelworkers are, in fact, the steelworkers. But when Mark Carney recently went, it was just him and a couple of his candidates dressed up as steelworkers. There were no steelworkers there. I think that the shop was probably too certain that the steelworkers would have heckled or badmouthed Carney. I thought that was sort of fun. But you're going to see a lot more screening out reporters, because that's the best way of screening out uneasy questions. Like a serious question we have is about his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, the fixer for Jeffrey Epstein, the pedophile rapist. I think that Mark Carney has a lot going for him. He has a strong resume. He is sort of likable on the outside. He looks good. He's not as theatrical and dramatique as Justin Trudeau is. He's unlikely to say things like people kind. But on the inside, he's actually just as mean as Trudeau. His response to Rosemary Barton, the CBC's flagship Liberal, was sort of astonishing. Stephanie Levitz and then Rosemary Barton asked some really basic ethics questions that any MP, any party leader should ask. And the response by Mark Carney was so startling. It was sort of, how dare you? How dare you imply that I'm not saint-like? And don't you see I'm doing you such a favor by coming down from Olympus to save the country? I want to play this. I've played this before, but you just got to see this clip again. Mark Carney thinks he is above us, above you, above journalists, above skeptical questions, and above complying with ethics disclosure. Take a look.
I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Someone who spent most of his life in the private sector, there's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
You know, when I was a kid, I heard that Mr. T, the wrestler and larger-than-life personality, had a rider in his contract that no one was allowed to look him in the eye. Now, I don't believe that. I think that was just some urban legend, but it wouldn't surprise me if Mark Carney has something like that. You're not allowed to look at Mr. Carney in the eyes. I don't know. He has other things that are just a hubris that I'm sure he gets away with when he's with his friends and they clap and nod along. He says things like, I know how the world works. I mean, here's a clip of him saying that. No, brother, I don't think you know how the world works. The world is an enormous place, and I don't think any one person knows how the whole thing works. I don't think you know how a lawnmower works. I think you have someone else do it for you. I don't think you've ever changed a tire in your car. I don't think you have spent any time in a factory other than maybe in some merger and acquisition for Brookfield. I don't think you know how it works when you have to struggle to make the bills, to pay the bills, and you have to cut back. I don't think he actually knows how the world works. Maybe how palaces work, but not how ordinary people who are just trying to make a go of it in our insane housing prices work. No, I don't think that Mark Carney actually knows how to make the world, how the world works. And I think he's actually always been a bit of a cheater. Now, he wouldn't agree with that. He would say, no, I just take opportunities and I know how the world works. But here's what I mean by a cheater. He has worked for public sector entities that have given him incredible inside information for decades. First, he was the head of the Bank of Canada, then he was the head of the Bank of England. In recent years, he's been a United Nations special emissary of climate or something. So how does he amass so many millions of dollars when he's working as a civil servant? Well, the answer is at the same time, he's got other things on the go, including being the chair of Brookfield Asset Management. And just as the same time he was a special advisor to Justin Trudeau, Brookfield was doing deals with the government. So you see what I mean about a double dealer? He was on both sides of that. He was an advisor to the Canadian government while he was doing deals with the Canadian government. You can't do that. I know he thinks he's really important, and I know he's above scrutiny, and how dare you ask him that and look inside yourself and all that. But no, that is exactly what most people would call a conflict of interest. Now, maybe at the UN, they don't care about that. And maybe everyone at the UN is some kind of crook, but that's not actually how the world works. For 99.9% of the people, the world does not work that you can be on both sides of a deal. That's called an inside job. That's called a conflict of interest. It's called insider trading. I mean, how do you get as rich as this guy by working as a public servant? That ain't a public servant. You know, I saw, Donald Trump is talking about Canada almost every day. Let me show you a clip. He's had a few. Here he is saying he would prefer to battle against a liberal as prime minister than a conservative. He's saying he would rather have Mark Carney beat Pierre Poilievre, but I don't think he knows either's name. Take a look.
I've heard you say this in all of the talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. Are you concerned that if they became the 51st state, they would be a very, very blue state? Very, very big and very, very blue.
No, there might be, but it would, you know, you have that artificial line that goes, that straight artificial, that looked like it was drawn by a ruler. Somebody with I don't mean a ruler like a king, I mean like a ruler, this way. And it's just an artificial line that was drawn in the sand or in the ice. And you know, can I tell Peter, just, you add that to this country, what a beautiful landmass, the most beautiful landmass anywhere in the world. And it was just cut off for whatever reason. It would be great. Now, Is it liberal? Maybe, but a conservative until I got involved, because I don't care who wins up there. I frankly probably would do better with the liberal than the conservative, if you want to know the truth. But just a little while ago, before I got involved and totally changed the election, which I don't care about, probably it's to our advantage actually, but the conservative was leading against, I call him Governor Trudeau, the conservative was leading by 35 points. So I don't know about that. I think Canada is a place like a lot of other places. If you have a good candidate, the candidate's going to.
Now, I don't know exactly what Trump means by this. Maybe just take it at face value. Maybe he's saying he would rather negotiate against a liberal. Maybe he thinks that a liberal is more pliable, more push-aroundable. Maybe he thinks a liberal, by definition, is weaker. I don't know what he means by that. Maybe he thinks someone who's Canada first might be tougher or harder to get along with. I really don't know. As far as I know, neither Mark Carney nor Pierre Poilievre have spoken to Trump, which is sort of crazy from Mark Carney's point of view, given that he's been prime minister for about a week. I know why Pierre Poilievre is worried, because if he makes contact with Donald Trump, which again would be non-standard, given that Poilievre is just the leader of the opposition, he would be painted as a traitor and a sellout and a mini Trump. I think that's why Poilievre has not actually reached out to Trump to try and solve things, because he would be pilloried in the press. But here's the thing about that patriotism and the Team Canada and all that. It's fake. The people who are now suddenly discovering their patriotism have, for the last 10 years, tried to destroy patriotism. They're woke. They are the ones who have dehistoried the country, deracinated it, vanillified our history. There are people who, for example, are working on the black justice strategy that would have black reparations in Canada. Reparations. We didn't have slavery in this country. It's where the black refugee slaves ran away to under the Underground Railroad. That's so ahistorical, and it's about building divisiveness and importing foreign narratives of racial interaction. That's just not Canada. You cannot be a Canadian patriot. You cannot say you love Canadian history and culture and our story and our geography, but also be the kind of party that takes John A. Macdonald off the dollar bill, takes the $10 bill, strips imagery off our passport, hides John A. Macdonald's statues. You can't, Doug Ford did that, but you just can't do that and say you're a patriot. Here's Mark Carney saying he really believes in being woke.
There's a fever gripping America. And while it rages, Canadians will remain resolute and true to our values. While America engages in a war on woke, Canadians will continue to value inclusiveness.
You can't be woke and a Canadian patriot. The two are at odds on purpose, because if you're woke, you say Canada is settlers, racist settlers who committed a genocide. That's what woke means when it comes to Canada. Mark Carney believes in carbon taxes, maybe not at the retail side, but if you look at his announcement, when he said he was going to ban the carbon tax, not because it doesn't work, not because he's ideologically opposed to it. He simply said that it was divisive. Well, yeah, of course it is. But he's not saying he doesn't like it. It's so obviously just a tactical change on his part. Mark Carney is not a Canadian patriot. We don't even know how much time he spent in this country at all in the last 10 or so years. Why does he have 3 passports? Does he have the Irish one for tax dodge reasons? Why are his wife and kids still living outside of the country? Are they going to come back to Canada, or only if he wins? There's so many questions. And that's not even a malicious question about his patriotism, although he would surely be offended by it. But really, has he just come back, like just in recent weeks, to rule over us? If so, that's astonishing. And all of this is my way of saying, look, don't lose your head. Don't lose your head over these polls showing that it's neck and neck. Obviously, the Conservatives need a new campaign tactic. I mean, Trudeau's personality doesn't transpose over to Carney, and some of his policies don't either. I think one thing is you can't out-liberal the Liberals, and they're trying to out-conservative the Conservatives. That's what their move is on, for example, the Northern military initiatives, or so their move is on the carbon tax. But I think it's still absolutely possible for the Conservatives to win. I think the Liberals are in fact making it easier than they should for the Conservatives to win. I see that Mark Carney recently hired the senior executive from an outrageous thing called the Century Initiative. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's this wacky NGO dedicated to tripling Canadian immigration levels to make it so there are 100 million people in the country, not the 40 million we have now. Could you imagine if everything Trudeau has done on immigration, shocking numbers, which has made all of us poorer, which has brought enormous crime, cultural friction, especially anti-Semitism and Sikh extremism and all sorts of battles on the streets. Could you imagine someone saying, that's not enough? What we have to do is triple those numbers. We have to bring in 2 times more Canada into Canada in the next 10 or 15 years. Could you imagine someone doing that? That's who Mark Carney has hired as a senior position. I think that shouts as a weakness. If you look at Canadian issues, immigration has really grown as an issue in the past couple of years. There's no longer I think it was always a fake consensus in favor of mass immigration, but it is no longer here. I think this is the time for the Conservative Party to go tough on immigration. That's something that Mark Carney and the Liberals will never be able to steal. I think going hard on crime is a similar issue too. I guess what I'm here to say is it's not over. Don't lose your mind. Don't read too much into the polls. In fact, sometimes those polls are designed to demoralize us. Don't worry that Conservatives are being tricked. They're not. In fact, I think this is the opportunity for the Conservatives to become more conservative and go places Mark Carney can't go. And by the way, I think the election's going to be called this weekend. There's still a lot of times to put questions to Mark Carney, questions that even Bob Fife won't ask. We'll show you some of those in the weeks ahead. Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.